everyone, what's up? I know I'm a little late, but today I figured better late than never. I'm really excited to talk about my favorite books of 2023. I decided that instead of ranking them, because I am a Gemini and I cannot pick a favorite, I have a different type of favorite book for every mood, every genre. I simply can't pick. I'm gonna just talk about all of my 5-star reads of 2023. I've narrowed it down to a top 3. So my top 3 5-star books with a few honorable mentions. I have to have a laptop with notes because this is just, it's too much. So to me, a 5-star book, it means different things to different people. Obviously it means the best of the best, right? For me, it's a combination of if the vibes are there, if I feel some type of way after I read the book, and I think it's objectively a good book. I know this may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm not gonna give a 5-star to a book that I personally loved, but I don't think it's necessarily well written, or there's some issues with it, or I just don't think it's good. I know that might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion. You can do whatever you wanna do. For me, this is the way that I consider a book 5 stars. The vibes have to be there, but it also has to be objectively good. So we're gonna start with the only manga that I read this year. I read volume 1 and 2 of Spy Family this year, and I loved that. I also read volume 3, but I did not give volume 3 a 5 star. So these two were 5 stars. I do consider manga to be kind of in its own category, but that's why I'm just doing it first. Even on Goodreads, I noticed that they are no longer allowing Spy Family to be like rated. You've probably heard about Spy Family. This recently became a little bit more popular due to the anime, but I have not seen the anime adaptation. I'm one of those people and I prefer to read the book before I watch any kind of show or movie about something. This is essentially just a cute, fun story about a spy who creates a fake family in order to, you know, do his spy things. And the fake wife that he chooses actually is an assassin, unbeknownst to him, but she's trying really hard to be a good wife. She's also considering this a, you know, fake scenario for her because she's considered to be weird and an outcast because she doesn't have a man yet. So, you know, and then they also adopt a kid who is a telepath. Is that the right term? She can read minds. So you have a spy, an assassin, and a mind reader child. Really fun, really cute. I have not read a lot of manga. The only other manga graphic novels I have read are Sailor Moon. So I'm very new to it, but I do really enjoy it. It's a nice change of pace. It's nice to pick up. It's nice to feel like accomplished when you just want to read something cover to cover, like read a full book and get that kind of sense of accomplishment. I definitely recommend picking up a manga. I actually have through volume 7 on my shelf, so I will definitely be getting to more of these this year, but 1 and 2 were a 5-star. These are on the bottom end of 5-star, but they're still 5 stars to me. I have talked about this before. Legends and Lattes was a cozy fantasy that was everything I wanted it to be. It really met my expectations. I find that a lot of popular books that I see on YouTube and TikTok and things don't quite live up to the hype for me. But this was one where I was very pleasantly surprised that I understood the hype and I understood what people were talking about. Especially I feel like as a fantasy reader, you read a lot of heavy topics, a lot of war, a lot of conflict, a lot of violence. And it's nice to just kind of have a short, cute, cozy fantasy. I find it very easy to read, really quick to get into. There's nothing groundbreaking going on. There's no major strife happening. I think that is what attracts people to it. I noticed a very big influx of cozy fantasies on social media, and I think it just lends a nice breath of fresh air. It's something light, but still kind of scratches that itch of reading a good fantasy. The main character, Viv, is an orc in this book. She's basically giving up her life of war and violence and all those things that you typically see, like I mentioned, in a fantasy, and she wants to start a new kind of chapter of her life and run a coffee shop. And I just think that is so adorable. I've said it before, I will say it again. I love just characters in coffee shops meandering descriptions of steaming cups of coffee. I understand that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but you know, I personally enjoy that. I love descriptive settings. I don't care if a character is just sitting in a coffee shop and I'm hearing their inner thoughts and there's descriptions of the sounds and the smells, and it's not action-packed, but I think that's why it's popular, and I think that things like that have a rightful place in reading. The author does a really good job, in my opinion, of setting the scene and putting a lot of thought into these characters. I felt attached to them, even though it was quite surface level. They still have passions, they still have thoughts. There is still some conflict going on within the story. I enjoy that there are various different kind of creatures in this world. I think if you have a background in fantasy, it really helps to enjoy this because you know what an orc is, right? And you can picture them on a battlefield with a sword and the armor and what types of conflicts are happening in these types of worlds. I think it's easy to use your imagination and fill in the blanks. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It was something different. I am very much looking forward to reading the prequel. I believe it's the prequel, not a sequel. I will be reading that this year. Okay, doing a total 180 from a light, cozy fantasy that is Legends and Lattes. This one is a hard hitter. This one is bleak. This is depressing, dark, sad. What more can you expect though from a World War II historical fiction? You kind of know what you're getting yourself into with this one. This is The Night Andale by Kristen Hanna. This is my third Kristen Hanna book. I know that there are some criticisms about her and her kind of the retellings and her lack of research in some aspects. I personally didn't think that there was anything glaring in this, but overall it's a retelling, it's fictional. Started with The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna, loved it. Also extremely bleak and depressing. Then I read Winter Garden. Four Winds was basically Dust Bowl America. Winter Garden, I want to say, was set in Russia, and this is World War II France. So that's kind of her thing, is historical fiction. I've loved them all. They're all really depressing, but they're all really, really good, in my opinion. All of Kristen Hanna's books are essentially following the stories of women, which I love. This is heavy, 450 pages of just heartache, fucked up shit happens in this book. It's a lot, but I just think that she does it in such a way. I do not claim to be a historian. I don't fact check my books. Obviously, if something is inaccurate to the point of being offensive, I would like to know that and I don't want to read that, but that is not the case. There might be some technicalities that aren't exactly accurate, but at the end of the day, it's a historical fiction, so it doesn't bother me. I believe one of the character's main plot points, something that happens and that she does, is inspired by a true story by a real woman in World War II. This book essentially follows two sisters, both in France. They're estranged at the beginning of the book, so they have very different lives. They've chosen different paths, and they do the same when the war starts. They both kind of take a different approach of how they're going to deal with it and handle it. And that's just something I think Kristen Hanna does so well in this book, is just the struggle and the personal decisions just in times where things are really bad and things are really rough and the world around you is crumbling, that there's no real right or wrong way to deal with it. Obviously, people have flaws, people make mistakes. Both of these characters have flaws, have made mistakes, but they also both do something really great in their own way. You're basically following one older sister who is married and her husband is drafted in the war, and she has to take care of her child. She's kind of in the thick of it, and the Nazis are taking over her town. And then there's a younger sister who is a lot more stubborn and outgoing and is outspoken about her opposition to the war. And obviously you can imagine that that leads her to some tough situations. It's just very hard hitting, very emotional. There's a lot of triggers in this book for sure. I just really love reading about Kristen Hanna's characters, women essentially of resilience, and what it means to be a sister, a mother, a wife, a neighbor. I just think it's done in a very raw, real, heartbreaking way that I can relate to a lot of the time, and I just really enjoy reading her stories. They're very impactful and they're very satisfying at the end. This is another favorite that I feel I've harped on in every single video I've made. Discovery of Witches was one of my favorite fantasy reads this year, It's about a witch who comes from a long line of witches who does not want to accept her powers and her place as a witch. She is a historian. She goes and works in a college instead and kind of pushes down all of her powers until things start to unravel, and she meets a hot ancient vampire, and they start kind of trying to unravel a mystery and basically the history of the different creatures in their world, which are witches, vampires, and demons. It's spelled D-A-E, like daemons, so I'm not sure if it's pronounced still or if it's the same thing as like what a demon is. Just really great. A little bit slow at times, but as I said, I love a meandering plot. I don't mind that. I thought it was done really well. I loved the vampire character in this. And I also read Shadow of Night, the sequel. I actually gave that one 4 stars. But this was a 5-star read for me. Everything that I love in a fantasy. If you're interested in libraries, ancient books, magic, vampires, slow burn romance, definitely recommend A Discovery of Witches. The next 5-star read is Writers and Lovers. I've also talked about this, came up in my tag video last. This is just a literary fiction about a 30-year-old woman who is a writer who is attempting to finish her novel. That's really what it's about. Her obstacles of accepting herself, creating something, being who she wants to be, dealing with grief and acceptance of life and what life is like as a 30-year-old, which I just think is so relatable. It's just done in a really realistic way, but the prose and the writing in this is just very beautiful. There's a lot of quotable pages in here. I just think it touches on a lot of aspects of like creativity and your passion, but also just kind of figuring out how to navigate the world as a woman. So I just can't say enough good things about this. I know that doesn't really say much about it, but there's not much to say other than if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. This one's for the girls. It's really good. So we're starting to get into like top tier category here. These are my top 3. So these are in no particular order. I can't choose. So we're gonna start with a little bit of cheating, and I'm lumping in the Serpent and Wings of Night books into one because I love them all. They were all 5 stars for me. So the Serpent and Wings of Night, and then whatever the sequel was called, something Crown and Ashes, something of the sort, and Six Scorched Roses, which is the novella in between the two. I honestly think Six Scorched Roses, the novella, was my favorite, but the Serpent and Wings of Night was definitely my favorite fantasy series that I read this year, over Discovery of Witches, I will say. It's very nostalgic for me. It reminds me of ACOTAR and Hunger Games and all those things just in the best way. So the main character is a human who is adopted by the king of this magical realm. Always like pointed out as like the weak one, the human. She's protected, she's sheltered. You know the trope. She is protected and sheltered by her dad. He has a lot of secrets. There's a lot of things that she doesn't know. So to prove herself, she enters the tournament that all of the strong and powerful vampires enter, obviously, because of course she does. She has to prove herself. The book would be nothing without this. So like I said, it has the Hunger Games kind of fourth wing trope of a legendary tournament. You know, she's the weakest link and she has to make alliances. And her main alliance is again, hot vampire. So I loved that. I loved Rain. I loved the main character, loved their chemistry, their banter. I just thought it was really fast paced. Something about this book just felt different to me. It felt fresh. I don't know if it's because I don't read a lot of vampire stuff in fantasy. So this was kind of my year of being introduced to vampires. I just love this. I think Carissa Broadbent does characters and plot and world building really well. Another one of my top 3 books of 2023 is Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is one of my favorite genres to read. It's a mind-bending sci-fi type. It's a thriller, it's fast-paced, action-packed, there's shit going on all the time. I read Dark Matter in, I don't even know, what is time? 2021, 2022? Who knows? I read Dark Matter, also gave that 5 stars. That was one of my top books of that year, as well. I really enjoy that type of media in general, movies and shows as well. I don't like horror, but I do like a mind fuck. So it can be a little bit confusing, I will say, especially if you are listening to it on audiobook like I did. I actually listened to it on a road trip this past November with my boyfriend, and he is someone who, I'm gonna be honest with you, has never read a book in his life. And he listened to this with me. He was like gasping out loud. He was wanting to continue when we were like stopping at a gas station, getting back in the car. I'd be like, are you okay? Do you want to keep reading the book with me, or do you want to put on music? And he wanted to continue listening to the book. That is the highest praises that I can give an audiobook. After that, he also listened to his first ever audiobook. So Blake Crouch, thank you. You did that. You really did that. Recursion is similar to dark matter in the sense that it's multiple timelines and time travel. You're following a cop. I know, but you're following a cop in New York City who is investigating this epidemic that's happening where essentially people are being driven mad by false memories. They're just having a random flush of memories that they've never lived. So people will be driven insane because of this, not just fantasy. People are convinced that they've lived these other memories. They'll remember a past child, a husband, a death, going to a different college, marrying a different person. You're following the initial kind of what's going on, what does this mean? It's chaos. And then a bit later, you're introduced to the second main character, who is a scientist who is trying to develop a technology to, you guessed it, relive your memories and capture them so that you can go back and experience them. She's doing this for her mother. I believe she has Alzheimer's. Like it's starting, and she wants to capture these memories for her mother so that she remembers who she is and who her family is. This is essentially her life goal, her life's work. Very Black Mirror, right? This is a Black Mirror episode, a good Black Mirror episode. Sidebar. Not the bullshit that Netflix recently put out. Seasons, 1, 2, whatever of Black Mirror is one of my favorite shows of all time. Like I said, I love this genre. If you like sci-fi in general, if you like dark matter, if you like evil geniuses and time travel, multiple timelines, cerebral up here, I cannot recommend this enough. I will be buying this physically, probably both of Blake Crouch's books, because I would love to reread them. Okay, and then last but absolutely not least, I'm not gonna say this was my favorite book of the year, but these, like I said, these last few are all kind of up there, and that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. To me, Babel is just book perfection. It's literary genius. I just loved every second of reading Babel. I obviously enjoy a school setting. I wouldn't consider this to be dark academia, so I see Babel be kind of classified in a few different ways. It's speculative fiction, it's historical fiction, alternate history, speculative fiction, fantasy fiction. It's essentially like it's in a real world setting, but in an alternative reality, if that makes sense. So the full title of the book is Babel, An Arcane History of Violence, which, if that doesn't make it seem like an epic book, I don't know what will. It's extremely epic. I'm gonna read from Goodreads because I cannot articulate. This takes a lot of brain power, okay? I'm not gonna lie. Babel, you have to be invested and you have to be committed to it because it's a lot. A historical fantasy epic that grapples with student revolutions, colonial resistance, and the use of language and translation as the dominating tool of the British Empire. The school is accepting students from all different cultures and that speak all the different languages because the magic system is rooted in translating material and kind of like enchanting it with language and translations to create kind of like a chemical magical reaction. And I know that sounds it's such a cool concept. And so essentially why they say it's alternative history is because it takes place in a real school, right? Oxford is a real place, but this didn't necessarily happen at Oxford. It really tackles like how obsessed people are with knowledge and power and control. It's fucked up. If you don't see a theme, I do enjoy kind of heavier, messed up things in between my little cozy fantasies and whatnot. It's just incredibly done, very well written, very on the nose. I just think it's pretty much a perfect book. This was like what the Atlas 6 and Atlas Paradox and stuff like wanted to be, but just on such a higher level, such a higher quality. I didn't even give it a review on Goodreads. I just literally was just like, wow. Wow. My favorite reading experience of the year. That was the book of the whole year where I was like, that's probably one of the best books I've ever read. I just want to give a few honorable mentions. These were all 4 stars. Even some of them I was gonna give 5, but I ended up not, which is Divine Rivals. I gave that 5 stars. And then after I thought about it some more, it's a 4. I will definitely be reading Ruthless Vows. More of a historical fantasy, again, in my opinion. I enjoy that kind of setting. It's not a straight fantasy. There's just magical elements, but it's really a historical fiction. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, really enjoyed that one. I love video games. I have a whole video game setup behind me to like young adults going through life, friendship and relationships, and developing a video game together. Done really well. Loved that book. The Ravenhood series, which is Flock, Exodus, and The Finish Line, I think. I'm really proud of myself for remembering those. Just a really like smutty romance. Enjoyed that series a lot. Belladonna, which was kind of a gothic fantasy. I read this in my book club. Everyone really liked it. A lot of elements of like death and plant magic and things like that with a little bit of suspense. My last honorable mention is gonna be House of Sky and Breath. My official opinion on Crescent City is it's not my favorite. Urban fantasy is not really for me. For the plot, for the universe, I read them. I do enjoy them, but I just can't give these books 5 stars. I'll be reading House of, what is it? Flame and Shadow at the end of this month. I'll definitely be reading it, but I'm not in a huge rush because this just is not my favorite. I don't like the contemporary urban aspect of this with fairies and archangels and things. I don't like when they're watching TV in their like high-rise apartment. I don't get it. It doesn't click for me. I don't love it. And Bryce is probably my least favorite main character of all of the Sarah J. Maas universe books. So this is an honorable mention for the plot and for the ending alone. I will give it an honorable mention. But that's just my opinion. That is it. Those are all the books that I enjoyed the most in 2023. No particular order, but definitely Babel, Recursion stick out in my mind for probably my favorite books of the year. So if you read any of these books, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. Maybe tell me what your favorite book of 2023 was so I can add it to my never-ending list of books that I want to read. I'm really kind of in the mood for another like mind bend sci-fi. So if you have a favorite similar to like a Blake Crouch, I also really love Chuck Palahniuk, things like that. So if you have a suggestion in that kind of realm, please let me know down below. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to me ramble. Give this video a like, really helps me out and I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to 2024 and creating more content on this channel. So please subscribe if you made it to the end of this video. It would really help me out. It really means a lot to me. You can check me out on any of my socials, on my Goodreads, all of that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Happy reading.